Well, hello. Welcome to Building an Effective Physician Recruitment Team. I'm excited to have all of you here today. What is really the most exciting thing about what we have to talk about today is actually what I've seen in practice, what I've seen work, and these are all living, breathing examples, and the information we'll go over today is all current. So really what we're looking at is, having a talk today about, how to build a budget conscious recruitment strategy. And more importantly, if there are any questions, any thoughts as we go through the webinar today, feel free to just pop those up into the chat box and we'll answer them immediately. As much as we could make this interactive, the better. I am Paul Olzak. I am working here at Practice Match. I'm the Director of Client Sourcing. The Client Sourcing team is just that. My team of 12, we're completely committed to sourcing for candidates in almost every single specialty you could think of, including getting involved in research searches as well. We do academic, rural, and community-based. And what I'm sharing with you today is what I've seen as a result of our work, what we're seeing nationally, what we're seeing as national trends reported to us by outside organizations, and how I see some of the things that we can help with and things that I've seen in other organizations, how they can make an effective recruitment team regarding candidate flow is really the most important thing we'll be talking about today. This is something that we talk about often in the industry, right? The days to fill and the days to fill for APPs and days to fill for positions. This is coming from the AAPPR benchmarking report. Again, the AAPPR is a national organization, for physician and advanced practice provider recruiting. The reason I'm showing you this graph is because it just gives us an idea that it's basically taking on average 2/3 of a year to fill a physician search. It varies, right? Could be a little longer, could be a little shorter, but the advanced practice provider searches are also up as well. If we looked over this data from year over year, what we're seeing is a trend we don't want to see. The trend we're seeing is that these days to fill are getting longer and longer. The fill rates, right, are another measurement used by AAPPR, and I really like this, right? And it talks about, the fill rates, how many jobs are open and how many are getting filled on an annual basis. And again, I like the fact that they include the canceled and the on hold, right? So the filled rate is, right now, as you see on the screen, is arbitrarily, well, I shouldn't say, it is definitely lower than the actual, right? Because if you take out the canceled on hold, it'll push that filled rate up. But you're definitely seeing a fill rate of around, as we see across all of the specialties reported by APPR, at around 50%. So this is the challenging part, about what we're seeing in recruiting, is that on average, you could see about half of the jobs that are open in your organization regarding any type of specialty. And more importantly, as you look at your openings as a whole, you could have as little as 3 or 4, or you could have as many as 100 openings. You could definitely think to yourself, it's going to be around 50% is going to be your fill rate. And you wouldn't be far off. We're not seeing any statistics that tell us anyone's at 100%. But the point is that as we look at the fill rates, we ask ourselves then, how can we make a difference here? How can we impact the amount of physicians that we're bringing into our organization to be interviewed, to be able to fill our positions? The most alarming part about what we saw in the 2023 APPR data is the fact that the days to fill are getting close to almost a year. The urology was absolutely, as no surprise to anybody on this call, if you're looking for urology, it's the longest days to fill, which was at 344 days. That's almost a year. But we also have 4 other specialties that were following up close behind it: orthopedics, rheumatology, neurosurgery, if that's applicable to your organization. Again, looking over the data from year over year for the last 5 years, again, these numbers keep going up. Will they max out? Sure. But what is the the impact of that on the organization as they continue to creep up? And so one of the things that we are looking at is, how do we impact this, right? So this is the question about today's webinar, which is, how do you impact the data that we just saw, right? The days to fill, the fill rate, right? And how do we manage that? How do we actively come back at it and say, you know what, this might be the trend that's going on around the country, but for my organization, I don't want to be part of this trend. I want to go against it. I want to make a positive change and make something great happen. And how is that possibly be accomplished? Well, this is the most interesting part about the APPR data, which is, you can see here how recruiters spend their time. And this is where I'm going to take a pause, right, and ask you to look at your organization right now in terms of your recruitment team, right? And I'm speaking about those who look for physicians to bring into your pipeline, all the way through the contracting and possibly into the onboarding, if that's what your team does. National statistics here say that the onboarding part is a very small piece of it. But if you look at this, it says 19% of the time is spent on sourcing. And the sourcing aspect of the funnel for recruiting is most critical. It is the part that provides us with the candidate flow. It provides us with the opportunity to go through and go put into our recruitment process those candidates to be interviewed, to be screened, to go to site visit, to have contracts offered to them. And what the data is showing here is that it's 19%. Well, again, the team that I run here at Practice Match is that we are dedicated 100% to sourcing. We have some case studies at the end of this presentation to talk about some of the impact we've made with our clients with the sourcing change. But more importantly, this is about, what does it mean to your organization, and why should you have the opportunity to look at your team and go back and say, what is the amount of time that's spent on sourcing? Because it ends up becoming the key to being able to affect the time to fill, the openings filled, and also the days that it takes to fill. It sounds pretty logical, but what we see across the country, and what I saw for the 7 years I was running an in-house department, is the fact that and talking to my colleagues in Ohio and around the country, is that I found that the majority of my conversations were such that the teams were structured so that there wasn't a dedicated sourcing effort for the organization. It was part of the recruitment team's responsibilities. When I was in Ohio, my team actually had dedicated sourcing, and it did make a difference. It did make a difference in terms of the amount of locums we needed to utilize. It did make a difference in terms of the amount of firms that we needed to utilize. And it had a positive impact on budget. And what I mean by that is that if I compare the amount of spend we would have had on firms and we would have had on locums versus what we were paying and having sourcing as part of our recruitment team, it was undeniable that the payback on the budget was positive. And to be able to talk about the positive impact in terms of the structure of the recruiting team, you can see in the next slide some statistics. Right. So how does the math stack up? Right now, if we looked at what was being said in APPR data, if we just did some math, 19% times 40 hours, right, is about 1.5 hours a day that you have sourcing happening in your recruitment process. That would yield about one candidate a week. My team, one person who's doing 38 hours a week sourcing is averaging 4.3 candidates. The interesting part about this is taking a look at having dedicated sourcing as part of your strategy is twofold. One, for 1 month, you would have an average person who's in recruiting being able to produce about 3.6 candidates. If you had one person in your organization dedicated to only sourcing, you could be looking at 17 candidates for the same time period. It's almost a 6-fold increase in the number of candidates. Now, given the fact that, yeah, sure, there are different specialties, there are different specialties that take longer and those that take a shorter amount of time. But this information is really undeniable in the fact that, as we talk to sourcing teams around the country, right, we find that that this is holding true, that a lot of the sourcing team members don't have dedicated time for the entire week. It's a portion of what they do. Looking at what we do and seeing the difference we can produce in terms of candidates being put into a pipeline, it does ask the question then, does it make sense, to look a little more closely at the structure of the recruiting team and looking at the spend on locums and the spend on firms, and to say, if those dollars were moved to a dedicated sourcing and a more focused aspect of the recruitment team being interview through contract negotiations, would that make good financial sense? And I think the answer is undeniable that it would say yes. Because the cost of having the physician vacancies is pretty large. Right? This is, again, information that we have from an external source, but they're basically anticipating that there's about $175,000 a month that is left on the table when a position goes unfilled. I mean, reducing that at all is a cost savings coming back to the organization. And you can see here, there are a number of specialties here that are common to almost every organization that are actually producing an average revenue of $2 million or plus. So just looking at it from a budget standpoint and looking at it from, of what would it cost me in the organization to add to or shift responsibilities in my recruitment team to be able to have dedicated sourcing, to have dedicated recruitment to those candidates, because if you increase the amount of flow in the pipeline through sourcing, the recruiters who may be wearing multiple hats are not going to be able to keep up. I do have an example later today to talk about that. We have an organization that is experiencing that at the moment. But the good news is it's a good problem to have. So, looking at it just from a budget standpoint, reduction in the amount of spend on a firm, maybe 2-3 placements of the year is more than enough. Reduction in the amount of spend on locums, as we all know, would be a huge plus. But more importantly, actually having those positions recruited into the organization and not having those vacancies laying out there for a long period of time, shortening the fill rate, right? It drives revenue back into the organization quicker. And all this would be budget positive. So why consider the changes, beyond just the budget from the firm or the locums? Right? Not saying we don't need these organizations, not saying they don't have the opportunity to work with us, but more importantly, looking at and coming back and taking a hard look at the structure of your recruitment team and saying, do we have the opportunity, right, to be more budget positive if in fact we relook the structure of the team, that we have a better understanding of what's going on from the sourcing standpoint, filling that funnel, keeping the recruiters busier than ever, but those recruiters being focused more closely, on interviewing, site visits, and contract negotiations. What's the upside? Well, the upside is coming back to the organization in a couple of ways. Having the more dedicated sourcing and having dedicated, the recruitment team working on the candidate flow definitely improves the quality and the fit of the candidates which your organization is looking for. The second thing is the cost. Right, there is definitely a payback, especially when you're filling quicker and you're filling more efficiently. The cost comes back to the organization, right, and it gets offset by the additional revenue produced by those physicians, and more importantly, it's by the reduction in spend on firms and locums. And then the last thing is really having that control over the process. So the benefit of having the sourcing team and the recruitment team dedicated specifically and more focused heavily on the sourcing, the interviewing, all the way through contracting, is that there's the opportunity for the organization to have a better understanding of their recruitment process. And you can control the time to fill, right? And you can control everything, again, by having a lower cost per hire, having more control over the candidate flow, and the quality and the fit of the candidates would improve. So I talked a lot about this, right? And I'll come to what's the successful transition to enhance the pipeline flow for the in-house recruitment team, right? Again, at the very bottom here, it's the 34 candidates versus 8 candidates really over a 2-month period. Right. So then if we, as we did the math earlier today, this is what you'll see over just the first 2 months. And it would be undeniable to say, if that's the kind of candidate flow that you have coming through your organization with the dedicated sourcing team, that you'd have to shift the responsibilities of the recruiters to more of a dedicated interview to contract flow as well. But the upside is that there can be extremely good collaboration between the med staff office, the business development team, and the onboarding team. So it's not impossible, and it's definitely doable to really make this shift in terms of moving your organization, to consider definitely a concentrated sourcing effort and then a dedicated recruitment team for the interview through the contract phase. Because at 34 candidates versus 8 over a 2-month period, as you move through the year, that'll vary, and you'll have ups and downs in terms of the candidate flow, but it will definitely require some changes as well in terms of how your process is being impacted. But what's the payback, right? And here's the best part about all of this. Not only is it going to be a budget positive for the consideration and the change to a dedicated sourcing and more of a dedicated recruitment team for bringing the candidates on board, but it allows the team to have a much more dedicated focus to the candidate experience. What we see is that, as the sourcing takes place on our team for our clients, we are able to spend time with the candidates who are not interested in the roles in which we're speaking to them about. We are having a better understanding from the market, what they're looking for. And then finding out what are some of the things that you could change or pivot with your organization to be able to have a better impact in terms of how you're promoting and working with your team to get your jobs filled. The second thing is that it really provides, right, you as a leader, right, and your organization, the opportunity to have short-term and long-term recruitment goals. One of the things that this change could bring to you without question is the opportunity to shift your recruitment horizon from a 12-month or even a 24-month horizon to that of 36 months. Why would that be important? That 36-month horizon would be extremely important for a couple of reasons. One, what we're seeing in the market right now are physicians that are actually looking across multiple specialties are starting to look about 18 months ahead of time. And that would give you a huge competitive advantage if you had a 24-month and even a 36-month timeline for your recruitment goals. There are organizations that we know that don't have these as long. They have maybe a 12-month, maybe an 18-month. And what's happening is that the candidates are coming into the fold and asking for the opportunity to make consideration or even be able to sign 12 months or less before before you need them into your pipeline. But more importantly, having that opportunity to have that conversation will set you apart and give you a competitive edge, no doubt. The other thing too is proactive candidate sourcing. Right, and you can have development of KPIs along this, right? So your key performance indicators with you have dedicated sourcing will give you a lot of insight into what your time to fill is going to look like, what your challenges are on the horizon. There's a lot of reliance on job boards, and job boards are good. They do fill jobs. There's data to support that. Approximately 50% of all jobs that are filled for an organization can come through a job board. But there's another 35% or so that are coming from referrals. And those referrals are coming from, and they're not paid, they're actually just physicians looking at your organization and trying to make a decision on whether or not they want to work for you. And that's where the proactive resourcing comes into place. And it's time consuming. And that's why the 100% dedication for a sourcing team being part of your organization is so critical. Is because we're seeing a shift with the candidate pool that's saying they want to check you out. They want to spend more time looking at you before they actually come forward looking to say, hey, I'm interested in your roles. My team definitely identifies physicians who are passively looking, who are not as active as they could be, who are busy trying to do their day job and also, run their personal life. And they are interested in changing jobs, but they're just not that assertive when it comes to the job search. And the dedicated sourcing opportunity for your organization makes a huge difference in terms of the number of candidates that come into your pipeline. But more importantly, you can identify the strengths and weaknesses of your recruiting process through a more active pipeline. So the payback is if you are recruiting and have more candidates in your pipeline, you may be able to see that there could be parts of your pipeline that are causing you delay, that are actually bottlenecks. And when you have a larger candidate flow, that'll help you across the board to identify areas for improvement. We all know on this call that especially if you have multiple departments that you recruit for, all departments act differently. Some are very engaging, some are not as engaging, and there could be bottlenecks for group interviews, physician interviews, site visits, and things like that. So what your opportunity with a larger candidate flow would be able to give you the vision and be able to see exactly where you are in terms of how your recruitment process is flowing and where improvements can be made. That comes into the accountability and the transparency for sure. But more importantly, having more candidates in the pipeline, having more candidate flow, that definitely gives you an opportunity to create more data and more data to make better decisions. And the last thing is that the big payback for having a robust and dedicated sourcing program is the fact that you can make adjustments to the ever-changing candidate pool. And we know, the 4-day work week didn't come from all of us on this call, right? The 4-day work week really came from the candidates realizing if they were asking for that would become something of a norm, and which in fact it's pretty much across the board the norm. That more and more organizations we talk to around the country have moved to consideration of a 4-day work week, and that was coming from the candidate pool itself. And the candidate pool really is pretty powerful. They can drive a lot of change and things that are completely out of our control, whether we'd like it or not. But again, having the dedicated sourcing team being able to really look at and to be able to interact with the candidate pool will give you a competitive advantage and a heads up in terms of what's happening in and about the candidates that are looking for an opportunity. You can go a little deeper too, the in-house recruiting team and what the benefits of that as well, in terms of having, a completely dedicated sourcing team, and also, a more focused recruitment team as well. There are opportunities to spend more time on understanding the competitive environment in which they're operating. The talent pool will definitely give back information if, in fact, you have the time to actually interact with the candidates, those that are not interested in your opportunities, as well as those that are interested in your opportunities. One of the interesting things here is about employer branding, right? And it's not so much about the employer branding as it is much about the recruitment branding, right? And being able to really develop messages that are more effective for sourcing. And that comes through trial and error. That comes through experience as well. But there are definitely things that work. We do know that, and I can share this with you and without hesitation, that we are seeing an opportunity to engage more candidates in the marketplace by actually changing the messaging to be more about the organization and about what it means personally to a physician to be able to work for your organization versus what the details are, or the parts of the job, because those can be duplicated, right? A 4-day work week can be duplicated across your region or with your competitors. You can, there are, situations where, there is no difference between compensation. But there are lots of differences between your organizations. There are significant people who work there for your organization who cannot be replaced at your competitor. There are things about working for your organization that go well beyond just the job. It can be professional career satisfaction. It can be how your physicians are treated at your organization. And it's that kind of messaging that can be developed, and really just through having a recruitment team that's focused on sourcing, and also focused on really getting the candidate through the process of interviewing all the way to site visit and contract negotiations, really pays back dividends. And it also just creates opportunities to build relationships, and to be able to have more of a focus on looking and going out after residency programs, fellowship programs, going out and being able to create either sourcing activities or recruitment messaging activities that are focused on alumni, on programs that mean something to the physicians that are currently in your organization, or do have an attractive aspect to your recruitment efforts for bringing physicians into your organization. So also, there's an opportunity too to leverage technology as well for recruitment. Right. Again, this is more along the lines of having, your applicant tracking system, your permission-based candidate databases that are available to you. For the fact that having a good data to work with will give you great insight and give you a great competitive advantage to be able to have your dedicated sourcing and your recruitment team being more effective and being more efficient in the work they do. And job boards and online job boards are still very important, but aren't really filling the needs more than about 50% of the time right now, as we're seeing in the marketplace. And that number keeps coming down. It is not going up. And so I think that's one important thing to recognize, is that, again, building out a recruitment team that has dedicated sourcing, and it has dedicated recruiter time and energy placed on getting the candidate through the recruitment pipeline, is just so important. It does pay dividends for the recruitment strategy, and building the team to have a more dedicated focus on sourcing, to be able to, if again, being budget effective, it's budget positive. It allows you to do long-term planning for your recruitment efforts. It'll allow you to have the opportunity to build your brand through recruitment marketing efforts. It allows you to be flexible, and it can allow you to have actually, a better plan for succession planning. One of our clients had put into place, and I think this was pretty unique, about a 1-year notice. If a physician is going to be leaving your organization or retiring within 1 year, they can give you that heads up, and they gave them a bonus, or gave the physician a bonus for doing that. But more importantly, how nice would it be to have a 1-year heads up in terms of somebody leaving your organization? And of course, we always have those acute opportunities that pop up as well. And having a team that is focused on more of a pipeline, having the talent to be able to react quickly to an acute opening that occurs, which we see that regularly. Again, gives you a huge competitive advantage. So really, today really was about talking about that it does make sense to have a look at the recruitment team, and to be able to see how it's structured, and to be able to ask yourself what portion of what we're doing equates into sourcing, what equates into filling the pipeline. And we do work with clients who do have dedicated sourcing personnel, and they do have an opportunity and actually a backlog of candidates in which they work with. So it is a very positive move, and it's a very effective move to be able to look at and to move toward having a dedicated sourcing as part of your recruitment team. Here's a graphic here for you in terms of what that can bring to your organization. It can address temporary shortages you have. It can provide opportunities for enhanced recruitment branding for your organization. It can add candidates to your pipeline. You can provide candidate feedback for your job opportunities. It can allow you to pull in recruitment marketing experts to be able to really look at your messaging, and to be able to have a better understanding of how effective your recruitment efforts are in terms of reaching the candidate pool. We do have a few case studies here, actually about 6 of them I can talk about in general. We do have we have the opportunity to work with a medium-sized regional provider in Washington, a large regional provider in Dallas, Texas, and a medium-sized regional provider in Alabama. And we had the opportunity to work with them as they were looking to work with us as client sourcing, to be able to bring my team on board, to be able to help them in a transition from how they were currently structured, to be able to bring on dedicated sourcing team members. They wanted to use our team to be able to help with that transition. But they were also looking at that too as a way to understand if in fact it was a positive move for them, and if it was going to work and have the budget impact that they were expecting. And I can tell you on all 3 cases, that was how it turned out. It was a positive move for them. They did realize the impact was budget positive, but more importantly, as they brought my team on board, my team also participated with them in their team meetings. We were able to follow their procedures, and more importantly, let them have the opportunity to really work with the team to be able to have that transition for them work pretty smoothly. We have 3 other organizations right now that are a little different. We have one that we're working with right now in emergency medicine in rural Texas. and having the opportunity to work with them in terms of the sourcing activities. Again, complementing their team of recruiters. They did not have a dedicated sourcing program in place. And for us to come in, we were able to, give them insight into strategy, into process, gave them the opportunity to understand where their bottlenecks were, provide some KPIs, but more importantly, improved, the number of candidates that were actually put into their pipeline. So again, they certainly have the opportunity to add their own sourcing team, and that's all. And that is really, again, showing them the opportunity that it really does make a difference to have the dedicated sourcing. We were working with an extremely large national provider for anesthesia, and we've been with them now for about 7 weeks, and we have really shown them the opportunity that they have in terms of bringing more candidates into their pipeline. We have over 43 candidates that we added to their pipeline in 7 weeks. And that was, the difference on that is that, it's a national organization. They have national presence. And so there's a number of places around the country in which the physicians can work. And it just, the feedback that we got from them is that we need to slow down a little bit because we were starting to, as I referred to earlier, the recruiters had to make some changes on their end so they can handle the additional volume. And then the last is a large private practice. It's a multi-specialty practice, but again, they found that they had the ability to run their own interviews, site visit offers, and they just needed the opportunity to build candidate flow. So again, working with them, we were able to have some great impact with them, but more importantly, being able to see that in all of these cases, that the organizations turning to a more dedicated sourcing activity does impact the pipeline flow. It does impact the structure of the recruitment team and it exposes bottlenecks. But more importantly, it provides that opportunity, for budget positive change that your organization will see. And I think that's the most important thing I wanted to share today is that it's what we want to do, right? We want to be able to bring back to you, our experience, and let you know that it is worth looking at, your recruitment team and looking at how that the sourcing aspect of it, is folding into your current process, and if you can go to 100% dedicated personnel on your recruiting team for sourcing, it will not only help you with your candidate flow, it will not only help you with having more candidates to choose from, but it will also enlighten you to the opportunities that you have in terms of messaging, in terms of building your recruitment brand, and in terms of just have a better understanding and having your finger on the pulse, what's happening in the candidate pool. The big picture and the extremely competitive advantages you can get from that is that if you can extend your recruitment timeline, out past 24 months to 36 months, you would be surprised, what kind of positive, impact that'll have on your organization. Any thoughts? Any questions? All right. Well, thanks for joining today. And if you have any questions about structure, if you have any questions about what we've seen with our clients, what we see as we work around the country, I'll be more than happy to answer those for you and be able to shed some more light with you in terms of any kind of metrics you'd like to see in terms of how adding sourcing to your recruitment team 100% can actually impact you and your experience. Thanks.